make $61,000 a year, and somehow you're still checking your account before you pump gas, not because the tank is full, because you're not sure the card will clear, and that small flinch before the pump approves the transaction has become so familiar you don't notice it as fear anymore. You just notice it as Tuesday. You're not bad with money. You've never bounced a check. You pay your bills on time, mostly, and you've read enough to know the words that matter. Compound interest, emergency fund, index fund, even if you've never quite gotten around to using them the way they're supposed to be used. You tell yourself it's the economy, the rent, the price of eggs, and some of that is true. But underneath the explanations you give other people is a quieter one you don't say out loud, because saying it out loud would mean doing something about it. There are 12 habits running underneath your life right now, mostly invisible, mostly automatic, and almost none of them look like mistakes while you're making them. That's the part nobody tells you. Broke doesn't usually arrive as a single bad decision. It arrives as 12 small ones, repeated so many times they stop feeling like decisions at all. Habit 1. Buying status instead of building it. It starts with the car, not because you needed a new one. The old one ran fine, a little loud on the highway, nothing that would actually leave you stranded, but because you got the promotion and something about pulling into the office parking lot in the same car you drove as an associate felt wrong. So you leased something newer, dark gray, clean lines, a payment of $479 a month that felt manageable the moment you signed it and has felt slightly less manageable every month since. This is the first habit, and it's the loudest one, which is exactly why it does the most damage. You don't buy status because you're shallow. You buy it because status is the only proof of progress most people know how to read. Nobody can see your 401k balance in a parking lot. They can see the car. The actual cost isn't the $479, it's the $479 every month for the rest of your working life, because the moment one lease ends, you start shopping for the next one, and the gap between what you earn and what you could have kept never closes, it just relocates to a dealership. Habit 2. Treating investing as something for later. You mean to start, you really do. You've opened the brokerage app twice, scrolled through the fund options, felt a small wave of something between confusion and boredom, and closed it again. There's always a reason it's not quite the right time, a wedding to save for, a slow month, the vague sense that you should understand more before you put real money in. Here's the thing that doesn't get said enough. The fund doesn't care how confident you feel, it just compounds. The version of you who puts $200 a month into a low-cost index fund at 27 ends up with meaningfully more than the version who waits until 34 and puts in $350 a month to catch up. Because the 7 years of doing nothing were never recoverable at any price. Time is the one input in this entire equation you cannot buy back. Every year you wait is a year the compounding doesn't run, silently in the background, without needing you to be smart about it. It just needed you to start. Habit 3. Living without a budget because it feels restrictive. You've never actually written down where the money goes, not because you're avoiding it exactly, more because a budget sounds like something for people who are already in trouble, and you're not in trouble, you're just a little tight some months. So you don't track it, you estimate it, and the estimate is always more generous than the reality, because nobody's mental math accounts for the $14 lunch that becomes a habit, the subscription you forgot you're paying for, the 11 small purchases that don't individually register as anything. The 50-30-20 framework isn't complicated. Half your take-home covers essentials, 30% covers the life you actually want to live, 20% moves to your future self before you touch anything else. What makes it work isn't the percentages, it's the order. Most people save whatever's left after spending. What's left is usually nothing. You flip it, and the rest of the month organizes itself around what's already gone, instead of the other way around. Habit 4. Spending to regulate a feeling. The bad day happens on a Wednesday. Nothing catastrophic, just one of those days that erodes you in small increments. A difficult email, a missed call from someone you've been avoiding, a headache that won't fully leave. On the way home, you stop at the store for one thing and leave with a bag, and the bag makes you feel better for about 40 minutes, and then it doesn't, and the receipt sits in your car door for 3 weeks because looking at it would mean admitting what it was actually for. This is emotional spending, and it's the hardest habit on this list to catch, because it never identifies itself as spending. It identifies itself as deserving something, as a small treat, as nothing serious. The dollar amount is rarely the issue on any single Wednesday. The issue is that the brain learns the pattern: bad feeling, purchase, temporary relief, and the loop runs on a loop, and the price tag has a price tag that compounds, the same way the index fund does, just in the opposite direction. Habit 5. No emergency fund, just vague optimism. You've thought about it, you know you should have 3 to 6 months of expenses sitting somewhere boring, earning a little interest, doing nothing dramatic, just existing as a floor. What you actually have is $340 and a credit card you tell yourself counts as a backup plan. It doesn't count, and you find out exactly why the week your car needs an $1,100 repair and your landlord raises the rent in the same month. Without the floor, every unexpected expense becomes a crisis instead of an inconvenience, and crises get paid for with debt, and debt is expensive in ways that quietly outlast the original problem by years. Habit 6. Carrying debt that works against you. There's a difference between debt that builds something and debt that just costs you, and most people stop being able to tell the difference somewhere around their second credit card. A mortgage on a home that appreciates is one kind of debt. A balance sitting at 24.99% APR on furniture you don't remember choosing is a different kind entirely. And the second kind doesn't announce itself as dangerous. It just sits there, accruing quietly every month, a little louder than the minimum payment makes it feel. The average American household currently carries over $10,000 in credit card debt. And at that interest rate, the math stops being a budgeting problem and becomes a structural one. You're not failing to manage money, you're paying a tax on having needed it once and never having fully paid it back. Habit 7. Letting lifestyle quietly absorb every raise. This is the one most people don't notice, and it's the one doing the most damage over the longest period of time. The raise comes, $4,200 this year. For a few days, the number feels significant. That's real money. That's movement. And then, almost automatically, the apartment gets a little nicer. The car payment edges up because the old lease ended at the right time. The credit card float that was almost zero creeps back because there were 2 months in a row where something unexpected hit and the card was just there. Within 6 months, the raise is gone. Not wasted on anything you'd be embarrassed to name, just absorbed, cleanly and completely by a life that expanded exactly enough to meet it. This is lifestyle inflation, and it doesn't feel like inflation because every individual step felt earned. You worked for the raise, you deserved the upgrade. Nothing about any single decision is wrong. What's wrong is the pattern. Income rises, spending rises in lockstep, and the gap between what comes in and what stays never actually widens, no matter how many raises stack on top of each other. 20 years of promotions can produce a life that feels exactly as tight as the one you started with, because the lifestyle was never given the chance to fall behind the income. It learned to keep pace. The fix isn't deprivation, it's seeing the pattern clearly enough to interrupt it once, taking even half of the next raise and rooting it somewhere it can't be absorbed before you ever see it land in checking. Habit 8. Comparing your chapter to someone else's highlight. Your phone tells you several times a day that someone you went to high school with just closed on a house, that a co-worker is doing 2 weeks in Portugal in the fall, that a college roommate made partner. None of it is fabricated. All of it is real. None of it is the whole picture. You don't see the mortgage that house came with, or the 2 years of saving that made the trip possible, or the 11 years it actually took to make partner. You see the highlight, compare it to your unfiltered Tuesday, and feel behind in a race you didn't actually agree to enter on those terms. The spending that follows, the trip you can't really afford, the renovation that wasn't urgent, isn't about wanting those things. It's about closing a gap that was never measured accurately in the first place. Habit 9. Paying full price for the convenience of not thinking. You don't shop around. Not out of laziness exactly, out of fatigue. Comparing insurance rates, negotiating the cable bill, checking whether the subscription you've had for 3 years still serves you, all of it requires a kind of attention that feels disproportionate to the savings. So you let it auto-renew. You let the rate creep. You pay the loyalty tax that companies build their margins around, betting correctly that most customers will choose the convenience of not looking over the discomfort of looking once a year. Individually, none of these are dramatic. Together, across a dozen recurring expenses, they're often a few $100s a month that nobody budgeted for because nobody ever sat down and actually reviewed it. Habit 10. Paying a paycheck as the whole plan. Income that stops the moment you stop working is the entire financial strategy for most people, and for a long time it works, right up until it doesn't. A layoff, an injury, a slow year in the industry. The 5 hidden rules sitting underneath actual wealth building all point toward the same shift, moving from thinking like someone who trades hours for dollars to thinking like someone who also owns things that produce income without requiring your hours at all. An index fund, a retirement match nobody collects because the enrollment email looked administrative, a small side asset that earns while you sleep. None of this requires becoming a different kind of person. It requires directing a portion of the paycheck automatically toward ownership instead of consumption before the rest of the month gets a vote. Habit 11. Ignoring the account you're not required to open. The 401k match sits in a footnote of the benefits packet that most people skim past during onboarding week, somewhere between the section on PTO accrual and the one on parking validation. 4% matched dollar for dollar by the company. Free money sitting there, unclaimed by roughly half of the people who walk past it every single year. It doesn't feel like a decision when you finally fill out the form. It feels like paperwork. But that single 15-minute form, made once, compounds into thousands of dollars over a decade without requiring another ounce of effort from you. The habit isn't laziness, it's that nobody framed the form as the most consequential thing in the packet. Habit 12. Believing it's too late to change any of this. By the time most people add up the first 11 habits, the instinct is to feel a version of shame that turns into paralysis. The car, the missing emergency fund, the raises that vanished, the subscriptions on autopilot. It can read like a verdict instead of a list of switches that can be flipped, individually, starting this week. It isn't too late. The habit that does the most lasting damage isn't any of the first 11. It's the 12th, the quiet decision to believe none of it can be undone, so why bother starting now? That belief is the only one on this list that has no upside at all. Every other habit costs you money. This one costs you time, and time is the one input you can't buy back at any price. The floor gets built one ordinary, unglamorous, unannounced decision at a time. A transfer that runs before you wake up. A form filled out on a Wednesday afternoon nobody else notices. A raise that gets split instead of absorbed. None of it has an audience. None of it needs one. That's exactly why it works.